Hello and welcome to She the People's Women's Writers Fest. It is the first month of 2022, though the pandemic has hit back again, but we are back with our online festival for you. She the People's Women's Writers Fest is the only women focused traveling literary festival in India, which has now gone digital. We are putting together world's biggest running travel literature festival for focused on women. Today our this panel is on pandemic and motherhood. We're calling it Pandemic and Motherhood and Every Other Test. Especially for the mothers, the pandemic has been difficult times. So, discussing this with us today, we have three wonderful authors. First up, we have Durga Shakti Nagpal. Durga Shakti Nagpal is an IS officer belonging to the Uttar Pradesh cadre. She is known for spearheading the largest crackdown against the notorious sand mafia of Noida region. She's also the youngest person to be awarded the Woman of the Year award by Economic Times. Durga Shakti is a motivational speaker frequently invited to speak by the TED portal and other student communities. Apart from her professional career as an officer she engages in philanthropic activities regularly and is a lover of literature, poetry, and fitness. Her book is titled Grow Your Baby, Not Your Weight, an extraordinary memoir of pregnancy, birthing, and everything between. We also have with us Neha Bhatt. Neha is an award winning journalist who reports on public health, human rights, gender, and education for leading international and Indian publications. Formerly a staffer at range of news organizations, including Outlook magazine, she has won the Press Council of India, UNFPA Ladli, and Reading Awards for Excellence in Journalism. Neha has also written widely on books, film, and culture. She holds a postgraduate diploma from Asian College of Journalism. She is an advocate of conscious parenting and co-founder of pioneering support network Gentle Baby Sleep India. Neha is based in Gurugram, where she lives with her husband and son. Along with Himani Dalmia, Neha has co-authored the book Sleeping Like a Baby. We also have with us Dr. Saroja Balan, who is Senior Consultant Neonatologist at the Indraprastha Apollo Hospital, New Delhi, specializing in neonatal intensive care as well as pediatric outpatient practice. She graduated from Madras Medical College, trained in pediatric and neonatology in UK, and is a fellow at the Royal College of Physicians, Glasgow. Dr. Balan consults as a pediatrician at Baby Center, the go to online platform for new parents. She has contributed several articles to medical journals and publications. Her book is titled It's Your Baby. So, I welcome you all to She the People, and I'll begin the discussion by first asking. Perhaps I'll go to Durga Shakti Nagpal and ask her, how has the pandemic affected you as a mother?
Thank you, Deepshikha ji, for a very warm introduction. And I'm very happy to be on this platform along with you and Dr. Balan and, of course, Neha Bhatt ji, very eminent people in their own fields. Coming to your question, how the pandemic has affected me as a mother. I think it's added to every woman, whether she's a mother or not, and particularly to mothers. The pandemic has added to their responsibilities because most of us are working from home. Our children are not going to school. So, from making them sit in front of the laptops to getting their homework done to handling the kitchen, and of course, the entire household, and apart from the fact that the work never stops, continuing your work, our responsibilities have perhaps become manyfold. 10 guna zyada ho gayi hain. But I think the woman, by her very nature, is born as a multitasker. तो कभी ऐसा टाइम रहा ही नहीं हमारी लाइफ में जब हमने मल्टीटास्किंग ना की हो. पैंडेमिक ना होके भी हमारी लाइफ में पैंडेमिक हमेशा चलता ही रहता है. Of course, this pandemic has been, double, triple dose, and it's taken a toll on everybody. But I think women in general have been able to reprioritize their work, their day, कि क्या क्या काम मेरे लिए ज़्यादा ज़रूरी हैं, कौन से मुझे सुबह निपटाने हैं, which works are more important for me, my children, their पढ़ाई, my work, or the household. So I think it has made women in particular much stronger from within. It has made them more focused. And in my own personal case, I think I've been able to reorient my day to deliver more in a limited time. और एग्जाम्पल के तौर पे जैसे अब क्योंकि मेरा बच्चा स्कूल नहीं जा रहा है बड़ा वाला, दो साल से स्कूल बंद है. आई हैव अ डॉटर हु 6 years ओल्ड एंड अ यंगर बेबी, अ गर्ल अगेन, हु इज 4 months. तो छोटी वाली तो खैर स्कूल नहीं जा सकती, पर बड़ी वाली 2 साल से स्कूल नहीं जा रही है. तो उसको पढ़ाना और इंश्योर करना कि वो स्क्रीन टाइम उसका लिमिटेड रहे, ये एक बहुत बड़ा लर्निंग रहा है मेरे लिए एज अ मदर ड्यूरिंग द पैंडमिक. बिकॉज all children, they are getting attracted towards digital screens, and they don't want to. Of course there are no opportunities where they can go and play, तो नेचुरली वो स्क्रीन्स की तरफ अट्रैक्ट हो रहे हैं. तो मेरे लिए ये एक बड़ी चुनौती रही है, एंड आई थिंक आई हैव बीन partially successful in handling her in terms of limiting her screen time.
Right. So, on this note, I'll like to come to you, Neha. Neha, since you are a co-founder of a social media support group for parents, what were the initial, some of the typical challenges that were getting discussed on the group? What were those pointers, early things that you noticed that parents were raising concerns about?
With the collapse of childcare and paid house help, we saw a complete breakdown in children's routines, which ultimately was deeply affecting sleep for the whole family. So we have a group of about 53,000 members, and every day we had dozens of queries, parents coming to us and asking us, how do we manage a child's routine? Everything has been disrupted, thrown out of gear. It's virtually impossible to manage one or multiple children, their nap routines, their sleep routines. Those who had no live-in help, or didn't live in a joint family, had their work doubled, tripled, and of course much of the burden of that caregiving was on mothers. And mothers have generally always struggled with their children's sleep, as we have seen running the group for about 6 years now. But this just made things so much worse. Plus, children were generally more restless, more anxious, unable to have the kind of physical activity that they need, and getting too much screen time, as Durga also mentioned. So children were unable to wind down at bedtime. Bedtimes were getting pushed to 11 midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., and then the next day children were struggling to wake up for school, right? So the main challenge that we have come across is, how do I get my child or baby back into a routine? How do we sleep on time so that we can wake up for virtual school the next morning? And of course, once schools began to open up, we saw that parents were struggling again to have their children wake up in time to go to physical school, because it was typically at a slightly earlier timing than virtual school was. So yes, over the last year or so, we've seen parents have come up with their own coping mechanisms, and things have settled somewhat. But I think disrupted routines remains a challenge in most households, is what we've seen.
Right. So, Dr. Balan, you were you are a medical professional at the forefront of everything, and tell us a bit about the kind of anxieties, the kind of dilemmas that parents were coming to you with when those who had babies early on during the pandemic, and later on. I mean, it's been 2 years. It's kind of becoming a part of our life now.
Yeah, I think it's not just the parents who've had babies just then. It's like any parent, whether you've had a baby during the pandemic or whether your baby was 2 years old or 4 years old, everybody was facing the same thing because suddenly things just sort of stopped. There was no school, and most importantly, as everybody else mentioned, that there was no house help. So people who were having people who had live-in, yes, but people who had most people had domestic help who came in the morning and left in the evening. So you had your all your housework to do. Then you had children of varying ages, so you had a child who was older, or you had a child who had to go to school, so you had to get initially there wasn't even much school, so the first 2 3 months was a nightmare for them because there was no school, but they wanted some work done. So, and the mothers and most parents now are, both parents are working, so so they had to set apart hours for their work. And because they were all working from the laptop, so the child couldn't understand why the mother and the father was on laptop and I can't be in front of a computer or a screen. So we had to, though initially we were like under two, absolutely no screen time, we had to relax that. When they came to clinic, or when we did a virtual consult, we had to tell them, it's okay. You tell your child, now let me in an hour or an hour and a half, we will sit and watch some TV, something where the mother and the child would do it together. So it didn't become like a mindless watching TV. So the mother or the parent, whichever parent was free at that time, would then sit with the child 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, not more than that at a time, where it was more like an interactive session. So, the whole life had to be changed, though we did try and reiterate that, don't, just because you don't have to get up in the morning and go to work, try and just stick to your sleep routine. If your baby's bedtime was 8 o'clock, then max 9, but don't let it be, don't let the child get tired and then fall. They don't fall asleep when they're extremely tired. They don't. So you try and stick to the time. Parents were finding it very difficult, and we're trying to motivate them to do it. And yes, and then suddenly when physical school started, then you couldn't get the kids to wake up in the morning to go to school. So it has been very difficult. We've had lots of calls with, little babies and little children who are irritable, who are clingy, who don't want to meet new people. They've only seen people in masks ever since they were born. And not me, I met grandparents, relatives. So, there was a lot of stranger anxiety. The older, slightly older ones were throwing tantrums, and the teenage, I think that age group is the one which I think has been mostly affected, because they couldn't go back to school. They have lots of little problems which they don't want to discuss with their parents, and they don't have the, otherwise you would meet every day in school with your friends, so you would just talk it out. That was not happening. So they were like bizarre tantrums, and some parents were just didn't know what to do. There were things being thrown around. They said, we just can't, we don't recognize this child anymore. So, and we had to then tell them that we will need to get some other help. As a pediatrician, I'm not the right person to talk to. But again, getting help, the number of people out there, very few, and it's all online, and it's not like a 5 minute consult. It would be an hour session, 45 minute session. So I think the children have really, the ones that have been really troubled by this. And we are, even the pediatricians, have been campaigns now to the government and things, to open school when we can. When things get better, open school, send them back to school, and then tell parents that you have to be sort of wary. It can, everything can be closed down at a, in a week, but at least for short periods that they can go back to physical school, or bring some structure to their life. Yeah.
So all three of you have written about early childhood, mothers, and the issues parents are facing in the first 2 years. Dr. Palan, I'd like to come back to you first and ask you about what were the gaps that you really found that motivated you to write this book.
I would not say motivated. I think I was bullied. I never thought myself as a writer, or even to string words together to put it down in paper. But my editor, ever since she came to see me with her first baby, I think the second visit, she was like, can you, whatever you tell us in the clinic, can you just put it down? I was like, I don't have a structured day, because I do intensive care. One day can be light, one day can be busy, and I don't have a structured day where I'll have like 2 hours to sit and write. So anyway, finally, 3 months before the lockdown, I consented to do it. And before that, I had did some reading of the books that's available here and abroad as well. And then I found that most of the books were not written by pediatricians. There were a couple of them here, very good books here in India, but most of them are not written by pediatricians. So I thought I should put a book like, when I was in England and I had my baby, and I was alone with the child, and there are lots of things that your textbooks don't tell you. You have to just sort of go out and sort of understand. and reading textbooks and figuring it out. So, I just taught myself as a parent all over again. And if there was some book like this, which if the child was crying or if the child was throwing up, I could open up the book. And at least, and especially in England, it's very difficult to find your pediatrician. No, there's no pediatrician, there's only a GP. And you may not see the GP for 2 days. And so you'll be talking to a health visitor on the phone. So, like, somebody who could be anywhere, couldn't get a doctor, like even in the pandemic, you could open a book and you'd be able to at least reassure yourself and say, now, which child is really sick and that I need a doctor now? And is this symptom not so bad and I can manage it home? So that is how it all started. And so I think the chapters just wrote themselves. Like, I was giving it to people to read, and I was getting, as I was writing, and it's very difficult to write. Because a lot of things we take it for granted as a doctor that people will know these words. So as I wrote, and I was getting this daughter of mine to read, and she says, I don't understand, what is all this? So breaking it all down was a little difficult, but finally got there, I think.
Right.
So that is how this book came about.
So, Neha, since you are interacting with a lot of parents online as well, do you think mothers today are becoming more honest, upfront about the problems they are facing and writing and speaking about it, or is there still a lot of stigma that a mother cannot talk about? Say the I have not been able to do this kind of stories.
I think it's both. I do think that women are able to talk about motherhood and maybe on the decision to not become a mother as well. And I think these conversations are happening more and more because there are more platforms, such as yours, and many others, and there are specialized communities that cater to specialized conversations. So certainly there is progress in how much we can share, and also the fact that there are so many different schools of thought around parenting on how you raise your children, and so certainly there is respect for different schools of parenting and things like that. But at the same time, I think it just comes with the territory. The more you share, the more judgment you do tend to risk. So certainly there are stigmas that remain. There is judgment always, even within these communities, and certainly some of the tricky subjects of motherhood. Whether it is stay-at-home mothers versus working mothers, or formula feeding mothers versus breastfeeding mothers, and things like that, which I feel has become more polarized. As we have more conversations, but I think that is really work in progress, and I think this is how we learn to understand each other more, and how we are able to have access to more conversations so that we can make informed choices about how we want to live our lives and parent our children.
Right. So, coming to you, Durga Shakti Nagpal, you just mentioned that you have like a 4-month-old baby. You have two kids, and so tell us a little bit about returning to work, because your work takes you. I mean, the bureaucratic structure and everything. So, how tough was it to return to work for you as a young mother?
No, Deepshikha ji, work is something that I am very passionate about. I love my work. So there was never a time when I returned to work. I was working throughout, except for the day that I went to the hospital for my delivery. And a week subsequent to my delivery, you could say that I was off work. But barring that period, I've been working throughout. Of course, I'm breastfeeding my child, so बीच-बीच में शुरू के दिनों में I was not working as much, but now I am working full time. And the reason that why I have been able to do it so smoothly is because जब मैं काम करती हूँ तो मुझे लगता नहीं है कि मैं काम कर रही हूँ. मुझे अपने काम से इतना ज़्यादा प्यार है कि वो ऑटोमेटिकली फ्लो करता है. मुझे ऐसा लगता है कि when you love something, whether it is work or it is anything, spending time with your child, rearing your child, anything that you love doing, it happens automatically. You don't really have to put in any hard work in that. आपको लगेगा नहीं कि आपको बहुत मेहनत करनी पड़ रही है. और कहीं ना कहीं आपको वो मेहनत का एहसास तब होता है जब आपको वो काम करना उतना पसंद ना हो. So in my case, I've always been I've always looked forward to, getting back to full time work, and it worked very smoothly in my case, बिकॉज मेरे बच्चों ने, एटलीस्ट बड़ी वाली ने, मुझे हमेशा काम करते हुए देखा है. तो शी वॉज वेरी सपोर्टिव कि मम्मा को काम करना है और मुझे मम्मा की हेल्प करनी है, मुझे कोऑपरेट करना है व्हेन शी गोज टू वर्क. एंड व्हेन शी कम्स बैक, शी मेक्स श्योर कि वो होमवर्क करके रखे अपना, सो दैट मेरे आने से पहले उसका होमवर्क हुआ रहे. एंड व्हेन आई कम बैक, शी वुड रन टू मी एंड से कि मम्मा मैंने होमवर्क कर लिया है, अब आप इसे देख लो. तो डेफिनेटली इट्स अ लॉट ऑफ फैमिली सपोर्ट ऑल्सो. एंड उस फैमिली सपोर्ट में छोटे छोटे बच्चों का सपोर्ट सबसे ज्यादा मायने रखता है. तो बट अल्टीमेटली इट इज योर ओन इंडिविजुअलिटी वेयर इट ऑल स्टार्ट्स फ्रॉम. अगर आप पहले दिन से क्लियर हैं कि नहीं मुझे काम करना है, देन योर जर्नी बिकम्स अ लॉट इजियर.
Right. And you have spoken about in your book about how family support and parenting has to be like a, everybody has to take
Collective
the
effort. Yeah.
collective effort. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, would you
Uh,
like to make any comment on that?
ओह डेफिनेटली. मतलब जितना मुश्किल एक बच्चे को रेज करना है, जितना मुश्किल पेरेंटिंग है, आई एम श्योर डॉक्टर बालन पर्टिकुलरली वुड अग्री विद मी, बिकॉज शी वुड बी स्वॉम्प्ड विद लिटिल किड्स एंड देयर पेरेंट्स डे इन एंड डे आउट. उससे ज़्यादा मुश्किल काम कोई नहीं है दुनिया में. और अगर पेरेंटिंग में आपको फैमिली का सपोर्ट मिल जाए, तो नथिंग लाइक इट. देन इट बिकम्स अ लॉट मोर ईजियर. आपके हस्बैंड का सपोर्ट, मदर का, और मदर इन लॉ, वट एवर द केस में बी, आप कहाँ पर बेस्ड हैं, आपके इन लॉज आपके साथ हैं कि नहीं. बच्चों के लिए नानी नाना या दादी दादा हो तो बहुत ये जो पेरेंटिंग का सफ़र है ये आसान हो जाता है. ऑन अ लाइटर नोट, किसी ने कहा कि जो ग्रैंड पेरेंट्स होते हैं उनकी और जो ग्रैंड चिल्ड्रन होते हैं उनमें बहुत जमती है. दैट्स बिकॉज दे हैव कॉमन एनिमीज. जो पेरेंट्स हैं वो कॉमन एनिमीज होते हैं पेरेंट्स के और अपने पेरेंट्स के. तो ये कॉमन एनिमी का फायदा है हम लोगों को, दैट इफ यू हैव योर पेरेंट्स अराउंड, इफ यू हैव फैमिली सपोर्ट अराउंड, तो जो छोटे बच्चे को बड़े करने का जो हरक्यूलियन टास्क है, दैट बिकम्स
That
मच
becomes
इजियर.
easier. So, I like to go to Neha and come to your book about, you're talking about sleep and importance of sleep in a baby and a parent's life. So one of the key issues where Western and Indian parenting is very different is about the co-sleeping culture, which is I think Dr. Balan has also spoken about it in her book. But first, I'll come to you and speak to you about uh, how does co-sleeping culture, the benefits of co-sleeping culture, if you think at all that it is benefit.
I can't overstate the benefits of co-sleeping. I mean, it's in Asian cultures, this has been the norm. In ancient cultures across the world, it's been the norm. It's really due to certain historical events in the West when, sleep training, separating the baby from parents was actually, considered something worth doing for the benefit of the baby, which we, get into in detail in the book, how sleep training actually arose. But personally speaking, I was always taken in by the idea of having a cot and a beautiful crib, and I spent thousands of rupees buying the best crib in town, and my child slept very well in the crib for the first 4 months. We were like, great, this is exactly how we see it in the movies. And the sleep training experts in the West always talk about how your baby must always sleep in the crib, and then the fourth month regression hits you, and the child is not going to take your word for it that the crib is the place for him. So there's no way my son would sleep in the crib beyond 4 months. And that's when I started actually thinking about sleep and thinking about how maybe I have actually my husband was never much in favor of a crib. He always felt safer to have the baby with us in the bed, but was always very keen on having a crib. But I realized that maybe I had actually suppressed my instincts when it came to sleeping with my baby. And post 7 months, we always bed shared. We were very careful about how we were bed sharing, never under the influence of alcohol or medication, loose bedding, never a problem in the bed and things like that. And my son has always slept beautifully. He slept like a baby. There have been disrupted sleep cycles in keeping with biological, development. I've always followed his cues, so he's had his naps in place, bedtime in place. It's, sleep has never really been a problem for us beyond the usual, developmental leaps and how it affects sleep. Now, coming to, co-sleeping, in Asian cultures, you would see that the incidence of SIDS is actually the lowest. So many studies have proved that sleeping together actually offers a kind of natural protection, if of course you follow safe bed sharing norms. And parents actually remain alert to a baby's movements, because that's how your brain chemistry changes when you become a parent. You learn to become alert to your child's sleep cycles, his breathing, just how he is, how comfortable he or she is. So I feel that it has now become something that parents get alarmed about, that bed sharing, co-sleeping isn't something safe, especially because the whole sleep training industry is of course a multi-million dollar industry in the West, and it is inching its way to India as well. So parents are very concerned, but I would say that the truth is that children are hardwired to want closeness with their caregivers. So when you don't co-sleep and you create separation, especially at night, there is bound to be stress, there is bound to be resistance, and because it just goes against your basic instincts. And but having said that, modern lifestyles have certainly made adult sleeping surfaces not very safe, not always safe. So there is a lot of loose bedding, and parents may be under the influence of drugs or alcohol and things like that. So it is something to be concerned about. But if you follow safe pet sharing norms, there is no problem in actually co-sleeping with your baby.
Absolutely. So I'll come to Dr. Balan on that if there is anything you would like to add there.
Yes, basically, yes, what Neha said. Most of us pediatricians, especially, you see, in India, most of the time, the co-sleeping, we're not talking about people who are like nuclear families, but very often a family's got one bedroom and they've had two children. There's no space for another room to put the child. So, so it's co-sleeping is nobody thinks too much about it. That's how kids are brought up, and which is perfect. But the only thing is, immediately post delivery, for the first few weeks, you may be extremely tired, when and especially when breastfeeding, lying down and breastfeeding. So I usually tell the mother, then either you'll make sure your husband or somebody is there to make sure that you just don't fall asleep. And if you're terribly sleepy, try to sit up and breastfeed, because we are, unfortunately, we have had time and again some mother just rolled over the baby because she's just was so tired, and there was nobody else in the room with her. Two, in the winter is when I'm really worried, because there are so many blankets and so many sheets, and this tiny little baby is already in all sorts of layers. And the other thing is, we are having more and more, because of assisted reproduction and this thing, more and more premature babies going home. The smaller the babies, and SIDS is far more common in them than term babies. And these babies, because you're 1.5, 2 kilos, 2.5, going home, and in the winter especially, I had just one 4 weeks ago, and it is just heartbreaking, because we worked so hard for that little baby. He was only all of 600 grams, and worked 3 months on that child, goes home, and 6 weeks later, and yes, the baby mother said, I breastfed the baby at 2 o'clock, and then put the baby down to sleep. It was one of those very cold nights in Delhi. I don't know how many layers was on, and woke up at 6 o'clock, because the baby, she suddenly woke up and realized that she missed the 5 o'clock feed, and by which time the baby was actually caught in between the bedding. So that is, as long as people follow it, there is no such thing as this is right and that is right. I think most things are right, and it depends on the mother. And otherwise, I tell parents, okay, if you're in enough space in the room, and you can put a little cot, you can take the cot side down, so you make it an extension of your bed. So it is, part, you are also sleeping, and then the baby is just sleeping next to you. And so parents have to adjust. You can't have a one rule for everything. and you have to go with the flow, really.
Right. So, I'll quickly come to my question on breastfeeding, which also you just touched upon, and it's been always, for a new mother, it's a very sensitive issue. Uh, Breastfeeding, of course, is the best way, but when a mother needs to top feed, top up, how can she? I mean, how can she do it without feeling guilty? Should she do it without feeling guilty about it? Because there's a lot of social stigma around that.
Is that to me the question?
Yeah, to you, Dr.
Yeah.
Bal.
So we as pediatricians, yes, we try and emphasize breastfeeding. I go out of my way sitting with the mother. I have a lot of breastfeeding sessions before they leave the hospital or even after they come back to the clinic. But saying that, if I feel the most important is the only way you know your milk is coming nicely is by keeping an account on the number of wet diapers. So the first week, I usually tell them how many diapers. Day one means at least one wet diaper, and by day seven, at least seven urines, uh, at least. So if the mother's not sure how much the baby's feeding, the other good thing to do is not just the wet diapers, to go back to your pediatrician and get weight checks done. Uh, Often, maybe every other day, every alternate day, and get help from your pediatrician, because breastfeeding, the advantages are so much that we have to give it a really good shot. And I have no problems if the mother has, there are certain conditions where the mother is unable to breastfeed for many reasons, or she's on medication. So yes, we use formula. There are these extremely preterm babies, and because the mother is so stressed with the baby in the ICU, she's unable to pump enough milk. So we have to. There are lots of situations, but at the end of the day, I think it's important for the mother not to feel guilty and to make the decision her decision and not be influenced by. Yes, if I feel that she's not giving it 100%, yes, I would try. But at the end of the day, I think it's important the mother feels comfortable, and I go with whatever she finally decides to do
Right.
after I given my spiel about it.
Right. So, I'll come to you, Durga. So, we're talking about welcoming a second child, and the mother be having to balance her life now between two kids. So, what would your suggestions be?
So in my case, there has been a good gap. There's been a pretty long gap between my two children. Like I said, the older one is 6.5, and the younger one is 4 months. So there's a good gap of almost more than 6 years. I thought कि ये ज़्यादा gap हो रहा है, and the siblings should usually be at a gap of 2 to 3 years. But when this new one came, I realized that a 6-year-old daughter was like a little mother to the new baby. She was a lot more responsible, more responsive, I would say, in helping me around, in taking care of the little one. I thought ki I would be not doing justice in terms of giving ample time to the elder one. बट आई रियलाइज कि जब आप बड़े वाले बच्चे को इन्वॉल्व करते हो छोटे वाले बच्चे के साथ देन द एल्डर वन फील्स एम्पावर्ड. उसको लगता है कि येस आई एम द वन हु इज टेकिंग डिसीजंस एंड दिस लिटिल बेबी बिलोंग्स टू मी. It's not somebody who's coming to take away time from my time. So I think that's the key to bring a balance if you have two children, that you should try and involve the elder one as much as you can. That eases your own, your own burden, and of course it makes your child feel a lot more empowered.
Right. So, I'm being told that we're running out of time, and I'll just quickly come to each of you and take your comments on a very important aspect, that motherhood and career can go hand in hand. So, Neha, first, I'd like to know your views.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, if you are, passionate about your career and a professional identity, absolutely, it can go together. And I think, if you actually involve your child in your decision to work, from the time that he or she is able to understand what it means, I think that really, really helps. I mean, my son has seen me working uh, from the time he was a few months old. I have had the advantage of being able to work from home for large parts of my career post having a baby. which is of course really helped me, because then I have the flexibility of stepping away when I have meetings, but largely being around my sons. So that has really helped. But certainly I think, and this is something that I speak with parents about very often, those who ask me for advice on how to manage your career as well. I always tell them, even if you're taking a break, as long as you kind of keep your network alive around you, don't actually just step away completely, even if it means working 1 or 2 hours a day, and then organically your career does become stronger and evolves as your child grows. So certainly there is a case to be made for not completely dropping out of the workforce. If it is something that you don't want to do, you don't have to. But certainly motherhood has helped me reimagine my career. I've stayed in the same career, but I think I'm much stronger professional I am now than I was before I became a mother.
Uh, Dr. Balan.
Oh, I never ever thought of not working, and I have three children, and like Durga, I've got a 6 year gap between my first, and I had a set of twins after that. But I think it was my family support, my mother and mother-in-law. There was no question of not working, and I think I sort of the time I was at home for the short periods of time, because you're in and out of hospital doing intensive care. Um, I never ever thought that I could manage both together. My children may say different, but not really. I think you can do both.
Durga.
No, I totally agree with Dr. Balan and Neha ji. And in fact, what I feel about motherhood and career is very in sync with what Dr. Balan and Neha ji said. जैसे कहते हैं ना कि सिक्के के दो तरफ होते हैं, हेड्स एंड टेल्स, तो आई थिंक वुमन की भी पर्सनालिटी के दो साइड्स हैं, मदरहुड एंड करियर, एंड दे आर वेरी कॉम्प्लीमेंट्री टू ईच अदर. अगर आप करियर पे रिज्यूम करेंगे, यू गेट बैक टू योर करियर, यू विल इंजॉय योर मदरहुड मोर, एंड वाइस वर्सा, कि अगर करियर में भी आप मदरहुड को एक अपॉर्चुनिटी देंगे तो यू विल एंजॉय योर करियर मोर. आई थिंक जैसे कहते हैं ना, द मोर द मेरियर. तो इट्स समथिंग दैट दे बोथ गो हैंड इन हैंड. For women in particular, it comes very naturally to multitask. एंड बैलेंस करते करते वो जर्नी कब इतनी खूबसूरत हो जाती है आपको पता भी नहीं लगेगा, और आपको ऐसा लगेगा नहीं कि यू आर मेकिंग एनी एक्स्ट्रा एफर्ट, because you enjoy the fruits of motherhood and career parallelly.
Right. So it's a very interesting discussion which will go on and on if we don't. I have to. But I sadly have to stop it now because time is up. Thank you guys for joining with us. Thank you for sharing your insights, and I wish you good luck with all your books. Thank you.
Thank you, Dikshita.
Thank you so much for having us.